Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into a question that's got people talking.
Oh, yeah.
Do running mates really matter in an election?
Hmm.
You specifically wanted to unpack this.
Okay.
We're digging into some recent polls about the current candidates
Right.
and, some historical data too.
Okay.
Get ready for some serious election deep cuts.
It's a fascinating area to explore.
Yeah.
We tend to focus so much on the presidential candidates themselves,
Right.
but the choice of a running mate can reveal a lot about a campaign's strategy and how they view the electorate.
Right. It's like, is it just a symbolic choice or can it actually sway voters? This Washington Post article really piqued my curiosity.
Okay.
Especially with how criticisms of Biden seem to be sticking to Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
It's a phenomenon political scientists call transfer of effect,
Oh, interesting.
where the public's perception of one person, in this case Biden, influences how they view someone closely associated with him, like Harris.
Makes sense.
The article mentions a YouGov poll. And for context, YouGov is a global research firm that found 4 in 10 Americans view Harris as corrupt.
Wow.
A term also frequently leveled against Biden.
Yeah.
While the specific accusations differ,
Right.
it shows how a VP often becomes a symbol of the administration's perceived successes or failures.
So it's like guilt by association. Even if the criticism isn't directly about Harris, you'd think voters would be able to separate the two, but I guess it's not that simple.
Exactly.
What?
It speaks to the power of association in shaping public opinion. And what's even more interesting is how this dynamic might be playing out with the newly announced running mates.
Okay.
Tim Walz for the Democrats and J.D. Vance for the Republicans.
Yeah, this Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll we've got here.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Ipsos is another major polling firm.
Right.
Doesn't exactly scream overwhelming public enthusiasm for either of them.
Yeah.
What are we seeing in the numbers?
This poll, with a sample size of around 1,200 adults and a margin of error of plus or minus 4 percentage points, suggests that neither Walz nor Vance is particularly popular at this stage.
Give me some historical context here.
Okay.
Are they outliers, or is it normal for VP picks to be kind of meh?
Well, the article actually compares their favorability ratings to past VP candidates at similar points in the race. And Vance, in particular, stands out as being unusually unpopular.
Really?
We're talking even lower than Sarah Palin right after she was announced in 2008, which is pretty significant.
Wow. Even lower than Sarah Palin.
Yep.
I mean, I remember that being a whole thing.
Right.
But I wouldn't have guessed he'd be polling lower.
Right.
You'd think there'd be at least a little honeymoon period for new candidates.
Yeah.
What's going on with Vance specifically?
Yeah.
Why all the negative vibes even within his own party?
That's a great question, and this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The article points to a couple of potential factors.
Okay.
It seems like there's some hesitancy about Vance, even within the Republican Party itself,
Interesting.
which can be a red flag for a campaign.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Sure.
Why are some Republicans hesitant about him?
The article points to Vance's policy stances and public persona as potential sources of this internal division.
Okay.
He's known for his populist views, which, while resonating with a segment of their Republican base, might alienate more moderate or establishment Republicans.
Right.
And then there's his background as an author and venture capitalist, which some voters may see as a lack of experience in government or traditional politics.
So we're seeing this trend of running mates not always being Mr. or Miss Popularity right out of the gate.
Right.
But if even your own party isn't sold, that's got to be a bad sign for the campaign.
It's definitely a challenge, no doubt.
Yeah.
However, it's important to remember that campaigns are fluid.
Okay.
And a lot can change between now and November.
Right.
Remember, you were curious about whether a running mate's popularity actually matters. And that's the million-dollar question.
Right. So historically speaking, have there been any VP picks who managed to turn things around after a rocky start?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it all downhill from here if you're not polling well early on?
Let's dive into the historical data for a moment.
Okay.
Remember that convention bump we talked about?
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of how perceptions can shift.
Okay.
It's that surge in favorability a candidate often sees right after those big, exciting party conventions.
Yeah, those conventions are hard to miss.
Right.
Everyone's looking all presidential. There are balloons everywhere.
Exactly.
It makes sense that it might rub off on the running mate, too.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a potent reminder of how much image and exposure matter in politics.
Totally.
But here's the catch, that initial bump often fades.
Oh, really?
It's what happens after that initial excitement dies down that really counts.
Okay, so you've got your moment in the spotlight,
Right.
and then the real work begins.
Exactly.
Especially for someone like Vance, who maybe doesn't have the same level of name recognition as a seasoned politician.
Exactly. Take Sarah Palin in 2008.
Okay.
She enjoyed a significant bump after the Republican National Convention.
Right.
But as the campaign wore on, her popularity waned.
Mm.
The article suggests that voters might have taken a closer look at her qualifications and policies,
Right.
and some found them lacking.
It's like that saying, you get one chance to make a first impression, but in politics, maybe you get a second first impression after the convention.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it underscores a crucial point about running mate selection.
Okay, what's it now?
It's not just about finding someone who looked good standing next to you waving at the cameras.
Right.
The real challenge is finding someone who can connect with voters on a substantive level, articulate a clear vision, and withstand the scrutiny of a long campaign.
Okay, so it's not just about appearances,
Right.
but you said it yourself. Campaigns are fluid.
Yes.
What does that look like for someone like J.D. Vance?
Okay.
Is there anything he can do to improve his standing with voters, even if it's an uphill battle?
Well, there are a few potential paths forward.
Okay.
One would be to double down on appealing to his base.
Okay.
The article suggests that Vance's populist message, while potentially polarizing, could resonate strongly with a certain segment of the electorate,
Okay.
particularly those who are disillusioned with the political establishment.
So really honing in on that specific group of voters who already feel aligned with his message.
Yes, it's about galvanizing existing support.
Okay.
The flip side of that coin is attempting to broaden his appeal,
Okay.
perhaps by tempering his message,
Okay.
highlighting his experience in different sectors,
Mm-hmm.
or emphasizing areas of common ground with more moderate voters.
Right.
It's a delicate balancing act.
A delicate balancing act that feels like the perfect way to describe the whole running mate situation, right?
Yes.
You're trying to complement the presidential candidate, appeal to different segments of the electorate, and also stand out as an individual.
Right.
Speaking of which, we've talked a lot about Vance and his challenges.
Yeah.
What about Tim Walz?
Right.
He seems to be doing a bit better in the polls, at least according to this data.
That's an important point. We can't ignore the other half of this equation.
Right.
And you're right, Walz's situation is interesting.
Okay.
He isn't facing the same level of negativity as Vance,
Right.
but he also hasn't generated the same level of excitement.
So is he actually popular, or is he just not disliked?
Right.
Is there a difference?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks to a broader trend in politics.
What's that?
The power of not being the other guy.
Oh, good.
Walz might benefit from simply being seen as a less controversial or less polarizing figure,
Right.
especially in contrast to Vance.
It's like the old adage. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Mm-hmm.
But in politics, maybe it's better to be inoffensive than inspiring.
It's certainly a strategy, whether intentional or not, and in a deeply divided political landscape. Sometimes that's enough to sway voters who are simply looking for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But this raises another important question about the role of a vice presidential candidate.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Oh.
Hit me with it.
Okay.
What else does this tell us?
Well, it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
is it more advantageous for a VP candidate to try and excite the base?
Okay.
Even if it means alienating some voters, like
Yes.
Vance seems to be doing?
Yeah.
Or is it better to play it safe, be inoffensive, and hope to capture those undecided voters who are turned off by the other side, like Walz?
Now that is a fascinating question,
Right.
and one that I'm sure many campaigns grapple with.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say it depends on the specific political climate, the candidates, and a million other variables. But maybe we can get some more insight from our resident expert.
I'm happy to share my perspective, but first, I think it's important to consider one more crucial factor.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah.
All right, you've got my attention.
Oh, cool.
Lay it on me.
Okay.
What else do we need to consider?
We can't forget about the elephant in the room,
Okay.
or perhaps more accurately, the elephant on the ballot. Donald Trump.
Right.
His presence in this race throws a whole other wrench into the works when it comes to analyzing the impact of a running mate.
You're absolutely right. We haven't even touched on that yet.
Right.
How does Trump's return to the ballot change the game?
Okay.
Does it even matter who his VP is, given his devoted base and, everything else?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We'll unpack the Trump factor and what it means for J.D. Vance right after this.
All right, we're back. and ready to unpack this whole Trump factor.
Okay.
It feels like his return to the ballot just adds this whole other layer of complexity.
It does.
When we're trying to understand the impact of running mates.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is such a unique figure in modern American politics.
Yeah.
He has this incredibly loyal base of supporters who seem to connect with him on a personal level almost regardless of policy specifics.
Right. It's like, does it even matter who's on the ticket with him?
Right.
His supporters are voting for or against Trump, not necessarily his running mate, right?
To a certain degree, that's true.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting. And this ties back to your initial curiosity about the role of the VP.
Okay.
The article highlights Trump's age as a potential factor this time around. Since Biden isn't running,
Right.
and Trump is, shall we say, a more seasoned candidate,
Right.
voters might pay closer attention to Vance than they typically would.
Ooh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
If voters are already thinking about things like age and potential health concerns,
Right.
suddenly the VP pick becomes a much bigger deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just about symbolism anymore. It's about succession.
Wow.
And this is where Vance's unpopularity could become a real liability for the Trump campaign.
Okay.
Imagine a voter who's maybe on the fence about Trump for any number of reasons.
Okay.
They see these polls.
Mm-hmm.
They see that even Republicans aren't thrilled about Vance.
Right.
It could be enough to sway their vote.
Wow. It's almost like Vance is a walking, talking representation of the doubts some people already have about Trump.
Right.
Even if those doubts are subconscious.
That's a very astute observation.
Yeah.
And it circles back to what we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
About how a running mate can often embody the perceived strengths or weaknesses of the person at the top of the ticket.
It's like looking in a mirror, but not always seeing the reflection you want.
Right.
Okay, so what's the takeaway here?
Yeah.
Is it all doom and gloom for Trump and Vance?
Right.
Or is there still time to change the narrative?
Campaigns are dynamic.
Okay.
A lot can happen between now and November.
True.
But this situation underscores a crucial point for any presidential hopeful.
Okay.
Choosing a running mate is a strategic decision, and there needs to be a clear and compelling rationale behind it.
Okay.
It's not just about checking boxes or finding someone who looks good in a photo op.
It's about finding someone who complements the ticket,
Yes.
strengthens the overall message,
Exactly.
and I think most importantly, reassures voters.
Yes.
Especially if there are other uncertainties surrounding the candidate at the top.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And for voters, this is a good reminder to look beyond the surface-level media coverage.
Right.
Don't just focus on the presidential candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to really consider the qualifications and the potential impact of everyone on the ballot,
Okay.
including those running for vice president.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
Well, there you have it, folks. We dove deep into the world of running mates.
Yes.
Exploring everything from guilt by association to convention bumps.
Right.
And, of course, the unique dynamics of having Donald Trump back on the ballot.
Exactly.
But the real question is, what do you think?
Yeah.
Do these poll numbers change your perception of the race?
Yeah.
Does the VP pick matter more or less to you now?
Right.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.